The Fatty Arbuckle murder trial was one of the most sensational news stories of the 1920s. But what caused it? What impact did it have? Let's find out. Roscoe Fatty Arbuckle was one of the most successful comedians of the 1910s. He was on track to rival the likes of Charlie Chaplin and Harold Lloyd, and was the mentor to Buster Keaton in the early part of Keaton's career. On screen, he was the archetypal jolly fat man, his comedy shorts delighting millions of people. His popularity was only continuing to grow. He even signed a hefty $14,000 contract with Paramount in 1920, equaling around $1 million in today's money. It seemed like nothing could hold him back from success. But his career came to an abrupt halt in 1921. On the night of September 5th, Arbuckle traveled to San Francisco with some friends and checked into the St. Francis Hotel. Then some young women were invited to their rooms, one of them being 26-year-old Virginia Rapp, a pretty young actress who had not yet hit the big time. According to Arbuckle, he had fallen asleep and awoke to find the women already in the room, having been invited by his companions. And no Hollywood party would have been complete without alcohol, which had fairly recently been banned nationwide with the passing of the 18th Amendment. By the end of the party, Virginia Rapp was very sick, vomiting profusely from intoxication, and had begun to behave strangely. After staying at the hotel a few more days and examined by a doctor after the others had left, she was eventually taken to a hospital, where she died on September 9th. The cause was listed as a ruptured bladder. The death of a young woman at a party with illegal alcohol and famous Hollywood celebrities didn't evade the news for long. There had been considerable suspicion about Hollywood from the public in recent years, especially from older people. To them, the dark side of the movie industry had reared its ugly head into the public light. At the same time, another force was at work. Tabloid newspapers had exploded in popularity within the previous decade, often blowing real headlines out of proportion. This movement was spearheaded by William Randolph Hearst and his publishing empire. The so-called yellow journalism approach of tabloid newspapers played a huge role in public opinion on the Fatty Arbuckle case. Hearst and his nationwide chain of newspapers immediately condemned Arbuckle and asserted that he was guilty based almost completely on spotty circumstantial evidence at best. Tabloid newspapers reported that he had raped Virginia Rapp and the weight of his large body had crushed her bladder, causing her death. This, of course, was only wild speculation. About a week later, when Arbuckle was sought after by the police, he turned himself in. Then he was processed and mugshots were taken of him. He was held in custody under suspicion of manslaughter for 3 weeks before his trial began and was denied bail. The trials were a media circus, with public opinion split, though many sided with the Hearst newspapers they thought they could trust. Throughout the trial process, Arbuckle received death threats. But Arbuckle's family and friends stuck with him. Charlie Chaplin and Buster Keaton both publicly stated that they believed he was innocent. Keaton was even given a warning by his studio about the comment. But some members of the Hollywood community, such as actor William S. Hart, who were not personally close with Arbuckle, condemned him as a depraved rapist and murderer. The first trial began on November 14, 1921. Matters for Arbuckle became worse as the San Francisco District Attorney Matthew Brady set his sights on convicting him. Brady used this scandal as an opportunity to further his career in politics. He was planning on running for governor in the next election, and he thought that winning such a big public case would give him the support he needed to win. The biggest problem for Arbuckle was a woman named Maud Delmont. Delmont never tested in court because prosecutors believed her to be too risky, since her story often changed and they considered her unreliable. But she was more than happy to give her story to tabloid newspapers, giving readers a graphic telling of the story. Delmont made Arbuckle appear to be a sex fiend, hell-bent on having his way with Rapp. Delmont also claimed that just before she died, Rapp told her that Arbuckle had killed her. In court, however, the doctor who treated Rapp would later challenge this story by testifying that Rapp had told him that Arbuckle hadn't tried to rape her or assault her. This was dismissed as hearsay. It was later discovered by DA Matthew Brady that Delmont had a history of fraud and extortion. In the past, she had arranged to have young women attend parties with wealthy men, whom she would later accuse of rape and blackmail them into paying up to cover up the scandal and protect their reputation. Does this sound familiar? Delmont even sent telegrams to the district attorneys in Los Angeles and San Diego, which read, "We have Roscoe Arbuckle in a hole. Chance to make some money out of him." Despite this knowledge, however, Brady continued his crusade against Arbuckle. Then followed dubious expert testimony against Arbuckle that was largely based around pseudoscience and speculation. One criminologist believed that Rapp's fingerprints on the door inside of the hotel room proved that she had attempted to escape. The only thing that assertions like that proved was that imaginations were running wild because of the trial. When it came time for Arbuckle to testify, he was finally able to give his side of the story publicly, though by this time, things had already gotten far out of hand. He said that Rapp had become sick and her behavior had become erratic after heavy drinking. After she vomited into the toilet, he carried her to a bed. Nobody called a doctor because everyone assumed she was just very drunk and would get over it by the following day. The prosecutors would use this fact against him, claiming that he didn't call a doctor because he used her incapacitation to rape her. During the trial, there was considerable interest in Rapp's medical condition. It was believed by many that she had been suffering from an untreated bladder infection for a long time, and that when she drank alcohol heavily, it caused her intense physical pain, possibly accounting for her strange behavior and the damage to her bladder found during autopsy. It was also alleged by some witnesses that she suffered from venereal disease. Furthermore, there was debate about the bruises on her body, something that was emphasized by the prosecution as evidence that Arbuckle had acted violently toward her. Some argued that she had caused them herself when she had convulsions related to her strange behavior. Others had the more far-fetched idea that it was a result of the heavy jewelry she was wearing. There was also the big question of Rapp's character, a very important part of the trial because it could change the jurors' outlook on her very quickly. Many things were presented about her, including her promiscuousness and her reputation as a heavy drinker who was known to take off her clothes when drunk. At the end of the trial, the jury voted 10-2 to acquit Arbuckle, but without a unanimous decision, no verdict could be given. It resulted in a mistrial. The second trial began on January 11, 1922. This trial focused more on the corruption and bribery surrounding the first trial, rather than on the murder itself. There was considerable focus on DA Matthew Brady and his extra-legal practices involving witness testimony during the first trial. Despite all this new evidence about the prosecuting side, there was little change. The jury voted 9-3 to acquit Arbuckle, which resulted in a second mistrial. At the end of the third and final trial, Arbuckle was acquitted by the jury, and the jurors also prepared this statement, which was read after the verdict. Acquittal is not enough for Roscoe Arbuckle. We feel that a great injustice has been done him. We also feel that it was our plain duty to give him this exoneration under the evidence for which there was not the slightest proof adduced to connect him in any way with the commission of a crime. He was manly throughout the case and told a straightforward story on the witness stand, which we all believed. The happening at the hotel was an unfortunate affair for which Arbuckle, so the evidence shows, was in no way responsible. We wish him success and hope that the American people will take the judgment of 14 men and women who have sat listening for 31 days to evidence that Roscoe Arbuckle is entirely innocent and free from all blame. As the jury's statement testified, Arbuckle handled the whole situation with integrity and level-headedness. He must have known that his career and reputation were permanently tarnished, but he didn't resort to the shady tactics of the opposite side, many of whom were simply driven by greed. For example, Arbuckle refused to allow his defense to bring witnesses to testify negatively about Rapp's character and her past, thinking it too unethical and disrespectful to Rapp. Throughout his career, Arbuckle was known by all as a large but gentle man, who was especially shy around women, and who would never do such a depraved act. But even though Arbuckle had many allies in his Hollywood friends, it could not save him from the damage the trial did to him. The influence of the scandal in the following trial was widespread. Such accusations of big-name Hollywood actors raping women, drinking illegally, and throwing crazy parties with promiscuous actresses disillusioned many people with Hollywood. It exposed the dark side of Hollywood despite having been completely fabricated. The whole scandal was a media circus that got far too out of hand. The trials were rife with corruption, bribery, greed, and lies. And those who perpetuated these lies, namely Matthew Brady and Maud Delmont, were never punished for their illegal practices during the trials. There was also a push to clean up the morality of Hollywood. As a direct result of public pressure from the scandal, Will Hayes was hired as the censor of Hollywood. He would later be responsible for the new review process for all films made in Hollywood and made strict rules about what was appropriate to release to the public. One of the first things Hayes did was ban Arbuckle's films from being screened at movie theaters. Though this ban would not last long, it lasted long enough for Fatty Arbuckle to be gradually forgotten as an actor and comedian.
And my friends, I haven't any, but if I ever get on my feet again.
The biggest victim in all of this was, of course, Fatty Arbuckle. Despite widespread knowledge of his innocence within the Hollywood community, his career was all but over. He was practically blacklisted for making any films. Arbuckle would assist making films behind the scenes as a co-director, usually under the pseudonym William Goodrich. He would even act again, but the scandal had a devastating effect on him. Before the scandal, he was always smiling, always in a good mood, but afterwards, he was sullen and depressed. Actress Louise Brooks described working with him in 1931. He just sat in the director's chair like a dead man. Arbuckle simply wasn't the same man anymore. And to make matters worse, Arbuckle's wife filed for divorce in December 1924, though they had been estranged since before the scandal, and it was not due to the scandal that she divorced him. Arbuckle would marry again the following year, but divorce again in 1929. The American public didn't learn their lesson from the Fatty Arbuckle scandal. Other notable deaths of Hollywood actors and actresses in the 1920s gave rise to yet more wild rumors and speculation and sensationalism in the newspapers. The Arbuckle scandal is regarded as one of the biggest Hollywood tragedies of the 1920s because it dragged an innocent man down from his respectable career and threw him away as if he were nothing. Fatty Arbuckle died on June 29, 1933 at 46 years old. Some people believe that the stress of the scandal and the disastrous effect it had on his career led to his early death. Even though this goes slightly out of bounds of the 1920s, I do want to end this video on a happy note. Towards the end of his life, Arbuckle's life was beginning to look brighter. He had remarried in 1932, and that same year he made a series of short sound films under his own name. The day before his death, he and his wife celebrated their first wedding anniversary. And also that same day, he had signed a contract with Warner Brothers to star in a feature film. He reportedly said that it was the best day of his life. He died later that night. His third wife believed he died a happy man. It's a shame that Arbuckle wasn't able to continue his renewed career, but hopefully he felt like a redeemed man when he died.
The song is ended, but the melody lingers on. You and the song are gone, but the melody lingers on.
I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you have any suggestions for future videos, please let me know in the comments. Well, that's all for now, all you sheiks and gals out there, but stay tuned for more tales from the Jazz Age.